You want to humiliate him?" Lily Harper's voice cut through the silk and candlelight of Thorne Manor like a blade. "Then you chose wrong. You brought the one person in this room who can destroy you." She dropped the $5 onto Elaine Thorne's white tablecloth, every coin flat and final, and she did not look away. Not from Thorne. Not from the senator. Not from a single person in that glittering room who had come here expecting to watch a poor girl stumble. They had built a trap and put her inside it. They had forgotten to check whether she had a key. If this story already has you gripped, subscribe to our channel, follow along to the very end, and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Cole Bennett did not want to go. He stood at the window of his ranch house that Tuesday morning and read Marcus Thorne's invitation for the third time, turning it over in his hands like a man trying to find the poison in something that looked like candy. The paper was heavy cream-colored, engraved with the kind of careful lettering that money paid other people to produce. Mr. Cole Bennett is cordially invited to attend the spring banquet at Thorne Manor Saturday evening 7 o'clock. Beneath that, in smaller type business of mutual interest will be discussed. He set it on the table. His ranch foreman, a weathered man named Dutch Calloway, watched him from the doorway. "You going?" "Haven't decided." "That's a yes, then." Dutch pulled off his hat and worked the brim in his hands. "Cole, that man has been trying to take your water rights for 2 years. Every lawyer, every county clerk, every underhanded filing you've had to fight that came from Thorne, and now he's inviting you to dinner." "I know what it is. Then why are you even reading it a third time?" Cole folded the invitation and slid it into his shirt pocket. "Because I want to know exactly what kind of trap it is before I walk into it." Dutch didn't argue. He'd worked for Cole long enough to know that when Cole Bennett made up his mind about something, the argument was already finished. The man had built his ranch from $40 and a borrowed mule. He didn't scare easy. But Dutch also knew that Thorne Manor wasn't a place where a man's fists or his work ethic counted for much. It was a place where the rules were written by the people who owned the pens. "Take someone with you," Dutch said finally. "I'll go alone." "That's a terrible idea." "Probably." Cole reached for his coat. "But if I show up with backup, he'll think I'm afraid. And if he thinks I'm afraid, he'll move faster." Dutch watched him go and said nothing else. There was nothing left to say. Across town, in a different world entirely, Lily Harper was on her knees. Not in prayer. In practicality. She was wedged between 2 grain sacks at the back of Culver's Dry Goods, trying to pry a broken floorboard back into place before her employer noticed the gap was getting worse. The board was rotted at the edge, soft as wet bread, and every time she hammered it down, it just shifted an inch to the left and grinned up at her like a mean joke. "Harper," Mr. Culver's voice came from the front. "You finished back there." "Almost, sir." "Almost doesn't stack grain." She hit the board one more time, hard enough that her wrist ached, and it finally settled flat. She wiped her palms on her work apron and stood up straight. 23 years old, and she'd been doing work like this since she was 16, lifting, stacking, hauling, fixing things that nobody else wanted to touch. Her hands showed it. Her shoulders showed it. But her eyes showed something else entirely. Something that most people in Red Hollow had never thought to look for, because they'd already decided what she was the moment they saw where she lived, and what she wore and whose daughter she was, or had been, because James Harper, her father, had been dead for 2 years, and the way he died broke foreclosed, buried without a stone marker, was a story that this town had already told itself so many times it had become comfortable with it. A man who couldn't manage money. A man who trusted wrong. A man who lost everything he built to bad luck and worse decisions. That was the version Red Hollow believed. Lily knew the real one. But knowing the real one and being able to prove it were 2 very different things, and she had learned slowly and bitterly that nobody in this town was interested in the proof when the comfortable story was already sitting there, all settled and done. She came out front. Culver was behind the counter, logging something in his ledger, with the focused intensity of a man who considered every penny a personal relationship. He didn't look up. "Sweep the front step before you go," he said. "Yes, sir." She swept the front step. She did it carefully, thoroughly, without rushing, because rushing was the kind of thing that gave men like Culver an excuse to dock pay. When she was done, she set the broom against the wall and waited. He counted out her wages without looking at her. $3.40 for the week. She took it. She said thank you. She walked out. The afternoon air hit her like a slap after the dusty closeness of the store, and she stood on the wooden sidewalk for a moment, breathing, letting the noise of Red Hollow settle around her, the clatter of a wagon, the argument two men were having outside the barber shop, a child running past with something clutched in both fists. Normal life. The kind of life that kept moving whether you were part of it or not. She had 40 feet to walk to the boarding house where she rented the attic room. She made herself walk slowly, because slow meant she wasn't desperate, and desperate was something she refused to look. The knock at her door came the next morning before she'd eaten breakfast. She wasn't expecting anyone. Nobody knocked on Lily Harper's door. Nobody had reason to. She opened it with the cautious pull of someone who'd learned that unexpected things were rarely good, and found herself looking at a woman she recognized, but had never spoken to one of the housemaids from Thorn Manor, a thin, nervous woman named Agnes, holding a wrapped bundle and looking everywhere except directly at Lily. "Mrs. Thorn sent me," Agnes said. Lily said nothing. She waited. "She has a proposition for you." Agnes held out the bundle. "There's a dress inside. Nice one. And there's an envelope with money." Lily still didn't take it. "What kind of proposition?" Agnes shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "The Thorns are hosting the spring banquet Saturday evening. Mrs. Thorn needs a young woman to attend as a guest, on behalf of the household. I'm not a guest of the Thorn household." "No, ma'am." Agnes's voice dropped. "You'd be attending alongside a gentleman, Mr. Cole Bennett. You'd just sit near him, be seen near him, that's all." Lily looked at the bundle. She looked at Agnes, and something in her chest went very still and very cold, the way things do when you recognize a shape you've seen before, just wearing different clothes. "Why me?" she said. Agnes didn't answer that, which was its own answer. Lily reached out and took the bundle. She unwrapped the corner of it, just enough to see the dress blue cotton clean pressed better than anything she owned. She set it aside and opened the envelope. $5, more than she made in 10 days. "Who else knows about this?" she said. "Just Mrs. Thorn. And now you." Lily stood in her doorway for a long moment, the morning light coming in cold and flat from the narrow window at the end of the hall, and she thought about all the things that $5 in a dress could mean, and all the things they could cost. "Tell Mrs. Thorn I'll attend," she said. Agnes nodded, relieved, and was already turning to go when Lily added quietly, "And tell her I said thank you for the opportunity." Agnes paused. Something about the way Lily said it made her hesitate just for half a second before she walked away. Cole arrived at Thorn Manor early on purpose. Not early enough to seem eager, early enough to watch. He stood at the edge of the entry hall before the real crowd arrived and mapped the room the way you'd map unfamiliar terrain exits, sightlines, who was standing near. Which conversations were happening in low voices, and which ones were happening loud enough to perform. Marcus Thorn found him before he'd been there 10 minutes. "Bennett." Thorn extended his hand with the warmth of a man who had practiced warmth extensively. He was 60 broad across the shoulders, silver-haired with the kind of easy authority that came from decades of being agreed with. "I'm glad you came. I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," Cole said. He shook the hand. "Honesty. Good." Thorn smiled. "I appreciate that. I thought it was time we spoke directly, man to man, without lawyers in the middle. What do you want to talk about?" "Water rights. Your eastern boundary. A negotiation that works for both of us. You've had 2 years of opportunities to negotiate." "I handled that badly," Thorn said, and he said it easily without any weight on it, the way a man says something he doesn't mean but has learned to make sound like he does. "I relied on people who were too aggressive. I should have come to you myself from the beginning. Tonight is me correcting that." Cole watched him. And the banquet. All these people. Thorne spread his hands. I host this every spring. It's not a production, just friends and associates. You would have met them eventually, might as well be here on good terms. Cole nodded slowly, like a man agreeing to something small, but his eyes were still mapping the room. I'll be interested to hear your terms, he said. Excellent. Thorne clapped him briefly on the shoulder, the practiced intimacy of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Enjoy the evening first. The conversation can wait until after dinner. He moved away. A younger man appeared at Cole's side almost immediately. One of Thorne's associates. Cole had seen him once before at a county meeting and started talking about cattle prices genially, easily, as if they were old acquaintances picking up a thread. Cole talked back. He let the conversation run, but somewhere in the back of his mind a thought he hadn't quite formed was working itself into shape. Thorne told me the meeting could wait until after dinner, which means whatever he's planning happens before the food. Lily came alone. She walked from the boarding house to Thorne Manor in the blue dress, carrying nothing but herself and the knowledge of what she was walking into. She had spent the night before reading, not fiction, not anything comforting, but land filings. Property records she'd been collecting quietly for months, copying from courthouse ledgers during the hours she spent waiting for Culver's deliveries. She had not told anyone about that habit. It wasn't the kind of thing you announced. It was just something she did because her father had lost everything to paperwork she didn't understand, and she had decided somewhere in the year after he died that she would never not understand it again. She knew about Cole Bennett. Not personally, they had never spoken, but she knew his name in the context of the land fights, knew which filings had his signature and which ones had Thorne's, knew that the water rights dispute was the kind of thing that looked like a simple argument about property, but was actually about control of an entire valley's agricultural future. She also knew from the moment Agnes knocked on her door exactly what role she was supposed to play. She was supposed to be embarrassing. A poor girl in a borrowed dress stumbling through a room full of people who had known money their whole lives. Clueless, graceless, something to whisper about and point at. And Cole Bennett was supposed to be humiliated by her presence. Either he'd be cruel and dismiss her, which would make him look cold, or he'd be kind and be mocked for it, which would make him look foolish. Either way, Thorne would have a story to tell at Cole's expense. It was not a complicated plan, but it was the kind that worked because it relied on people behaving exactly as they were expected to. Lily had no intention of behaving as expected. She walked into the hall with her head up and her hands quiet at her sides, and the first thing she did was read the room, the same instinct Cole had used, though she'd never been trained in anything formal. Just a lifetime of needing to know who in a room was dangerous and who was merely indifferent. She spotted Cole before she spotted Thorne, because Cole was the one who looked slightly out of place. Not poorly dressed, not awkward, just watchful in a way that didn't quite match the polished ease around him. He was standing near the east wall with a glass in his hand, listening to someone talk, but his attention was somewhere else. She moved to the far end of the room and waited. That was the instruction she'd been given. Wait near the servants' entrance, and Agnes would bring her to Cole when the timing was right. She waited. And while she waited, she listened, because listening was something she was very good at. It was Senator Gerald Payne who said it first loudly enough that it was clearly meant to carry. "Is that Harper's daughter?" The woman beside him turned to look at Lily, and the look was the particular variety, not hostile, exactly more like the expression you'd give a stray cat that had wandered into your dining room, that made clear she had been categorized and dismissed in the same moment. "I believe so," the woman said. "Poor thing. What on earth is she doing here? Elaine must have invited her. You know how she is about her charity projects." They moved on. Lily stood still and kept her face pleasant and empty, which she had learned was the most powerful expression available to a woman in a room where everyone had already decided she was irrelevant. But her heart was hammering, not from fear, from anger. Controlled, cold, useful anger, the kind that didn't shake her hands but sharpened her thinking. The kind that she had been building and managing for 2 years, ever since she stood in a courthouse and watched a judge rule against her father's estate without once looking up from his papers. She breathed through it. And then she saw Cole Bennett look across the room and find her. Not the way the senator had looked at her. Not like she was a stray cat or a curiosity or a problem. He looked at her the way you look at something that doesn't fit, and you're trying to understand why, genuinely trying without having already decided the answer. She didn't look away. Neither did he. Agnes appeared at her elbow a moment later, flustered, lower lip pressed thin. "It's time," she whispered. "Mr. Thorne wants you at the table." Lily followed her. They moved through the crowd, and she felt the whispers peel off them, like water off a stone. Is that, and who brought, and one sharp laugh from somewhere she couldn't quite locate, mean and pleased with itself. She sat down at the place indicated. It was at the end of the main table beside an empty chair. She understood without being told that the empty chair was Cole's. She folded her hands in her lap. She waited. Marcus Thorne caught her eye from across the table and gave her a small, satisfied nod. The look of a man whose arrangements were proceeding exactly as planned. She gave him nothing back. Not defiance, not acknowledgement. Just a still face and calm eyes. Cole came to the table 2 minutes later, guided by one of Thorne's men, and when he reached his assigned seat and saw who was sitting beside it, he stopped. He looked at Lily. He looked at Thorne. And something moved behind his eyes. Quick quiet. The kind of recalculation that happens in seconds when a man who is good at reading situations reads one correctly. He didn't say anything. He pulled out the chair beside Lily and sat down. "Evening," he said to her. "Evening," she said. Across the table someone giggled softly. A woman's voice swiftly hushed. The soup was brought out. Conversation filled the room again, loud and comfortable, the sound of people who had money and ease and no pressing reason to worry about anything. Cole didn't touch his bowl immediately. He leaned slightly toward Lily and said very quietly, as if he was commenting on the weather, "You know what you're here for." It wasn't a question. "Yes," she said, equally quiet. "Do you?" He looked at her. Really looked, not the passing glance of someone being polite, but the focused attention of someone reassessing. "Thorne arranged this," he said. "His wife arranged the dress and the $5, Lily said. Mr. Thorne arranged the table seating and the whispers." Cole was quiet for a moment. $5. And the dress. She kept her eyes forward toward the center of the table. "I'm not ashamed of what I earn, Mr. Bennett, but I thought you should know the full cost of this evening." He was silent for 3 full seconds. She counted. "Why?" he said. "Why tell me?" "Because you're the one they're trying to embarrass," she said. "And you can't defend yourself against something you don't know is happening." He picked up his spoon. "And what about you? What are you defending?" She picked up hers. "Nothing yet," she said. "But the evening is young." The dinner table shifted the way dinner tables do, when enough people are aware of a drama unfolding at one end of them, gradually, like a slow tide. First, the woman directly across from them stopped talking to her neighbor and found reasons to glance their way. Then the man beside her noticed her noticing. Then a third, and a fourth, until a quiet audience had assembled, without anyone having to admit they were watching. Thorne let it build. He was patient that way. The patience of someone who had learned that the best traps spring themselves if you give them enough time. He waited until the main course was served, until wine glasses had been refilled once or twice, until the room was warm and loose, and the whispers had reached everyone worth reaching. Then he leaned forward and addressed Cole across the table with the comfortable ease of a man who already knew how a story ended. "Bennett," he said. "I hope you don't mind if I ask, did you arrange for a guest this evening, or did someone take the liberty of seating arrangements on your behalf?" Laughter. Not loud, controlled knowing, but enough. The sound of people letting themselves in on a joke. Cole set down his fork. The laughter didn't quite die, but it thinned. Something in the way he set it down, not angry, just deliberate, made people pay attention. She's my guest, Cole said. Simple. Flat. No room in it. The laughter stopped completely. Thorne's smile stayed in place, but his eyes recalibrated. Of course, he said pleasantly. Forgive me. I wasn't aware you two were acquainted. We are now, Cole said. He picked up his fork and went back to eating, as if that was the entire conversation. As if Marcus Thorne hadn't just tried to make him the punchline of a room full of people, and as if that attempt hadn't just folded in on itself like wet paper. Lily did not look at Cole. She looked at her plate. But something in her chest had shifted. Something that had been clenched tight and braced for impact had loosened just slightly, just enough. Not relief. She was too careful for relief, but something adjacent to it. The Senator Payne tried next. He was the kind of man who read social tides well enough to know when an opening had closed, but not well enough to know when to stop pushing. Miss Harper, isn't it? He said, addressing her directly for the first time. The warm, expansive tone of a powerful man being generous. James Harper's daughter. Yes, Lily said. Terrible business what happened to your father. Payne shook his head with the sorrow of someone who had not thought about James Harper in 2 years until this moment. Lost everything, didn't he? Bad luck with the land filings, I heard. Bad luck, Lily said evenly. Or something else. The table quieted again. Payne's eyebrows lifted. Something else? Bad paperwork has a way of looking like bad luck, she said. Especially to the people who didn't file it. Payne glanced at Thorne. Thorne's expression had not changed, still that smooth, pleasant control, but his fork had stopped moving. That's a serious accusation, young lady, Payne said. I didn't make an accusation, Lily said. I made an observation. There's a difference. She looked at him pleasantly. Would you like me to explain the difference? Payne opened his mouth, closed it, let out a short sound that might have been a laugh if it had anywhere to go. Across the table, a woman Lily didn't recognize pressed her lips together to hide a smile. Cole said nothing. He kept eating, but his right hand beside his plate had relaxed from a near fist into an open palm, and Lily, who was paying attention, noticed. Thorne refilled his wine glass himself and let the noise of general conversation return before he spoke again. When he did, his voice was pitched carefully, friendly, public, completely in control. Your father was a good man, Miss Harper. Genuinely. It's a pity about how things ended for him. A man with ambition and not quite enough well. He made a gracious, regretful gesture. Not quite enough of what it takes. Capital, Lily said. He blinked. Pardon. Not quite enough capital, she said. That's what you were going to say, isn't it? That's usually what you mean when you say someone didn't have quite enough of what it takes. She looked at him across the table, and her voice was perfectly civil. My father had plenty of what it takes, Mr. Thorne. He was smart. He worked hard. He filed everything correctly. What he didn't have was a lawyer who could catch a fraudulent counterfiling before the 30-day window closed. The table had gone very quiet. Thorne's jaw had not moved. His expression had not changed. But his eyes were doing something different, sharp, recalculating, the smile still there, but the ease behind it gone. I'm not sure what you think you know, he started. Water rights on the Callaway tributary, Lily said. Filed under Harper Family Holdings in March of 1881. Counterfiled 6 weeks later under Thorne Land Management with a processing date that the county records show as 14 days before the counterfiling was submitted. She paused. 14 days before it was submitted. That's an interesting magic trick, Mr. Thorne. Dead silence. Cole's fork was completely still. Senator Payne's wine glass was halfway to his mouth and had stopped there. Thorne set his knife down, carefully, the way a man moves when he is deciding very quickly what the next 30 seconds need to look like. Young woman, he said, and his voice had lost its warmth, entirely dropped to something colder and harder underneath. I would be very careful about repeating something like that in company. I've been careful for 2 years, Lily said. It's become quite comfortable. She looked at him without flinching, without heat, just steadily, The way you look at something you've been studying for a long time and finally have in clear view. I have copies of the original filings, Mr. Thorne. The timestamps are very informative. The woman across the table who had hidden her smile was no longer hiding it. Marcus Thorne pushed back his chair just slightly and looked down the table with the particular expression of a man reminding everyone in the room who exactly held power here. Perhaps, he said carefully, we should continue this conversation privately. I'm comfortable here, Lily said, and the room, the glittering whispered laugh-ready room that had assembled to watch a poor girl stumble, held its breath and waited to see what happened next. The silence that followed Lily's words was the kind that had weight to it, the kind you could feel pressing against your chest if you were sitting in that room, which most of those people wished suddenly that they were not. Marcus Thorne did not raise his voice. Men like Thorne never raised their voices in public. That was one of the first things power taught you, that volume was for people who had nothing else. He simply looked at Lily Harper with the measured patience of a man who had dismantled larger obstacles than a 23-year-old girl in a borrowed dress, and he smiled. Miss Harper, he said, I think you've had a long evening, and perhaps the excitement of the occasion has led you to say things that in the morning you might wish you'd kept to yourself. It was masterfully done. In 4 sentences, he had managed to suggest she was tired, overwhelmed socially out of her depth, and reckless, all without saying any of it directly. Half the table relaxed. That was the genius of it. He hadn't attacked her. He'd just gently reminded everyone in the room that she was the kind of person whose words didn't need to be taken seriously. Lily let the sentence finish. Let the breath of relief move around the table. Let people start to settle. Then she said, the filing number is 1881-447-W. The original submission date is March 14th. The county stamp on the counterfiling reads February 28th. That is 14 days before my father's original filing existed. She paused. I don't need the morning to think about that, Mr. Thorne. I've had 2 years. The relief evaporated. Just like that. Like someone had opened a window in a warm room. Senator Payne put his wine glass down. Not gently, it made a small, hard sound against the tablecloth. Cole had gone absolutely still beside her. Not the stillness of shock, the stillness of a man who was listening with everything he had. Thorne's smile held, but it had become a different kind of smile, thinner, more deliberate, the kind that was holding something back instead of letting something out. That's a very specific claim, he said. Yes, Lily said. It is. And do you have documentation to support it, or is this something you've reconstructed from memory? I have copies. Here, not here. She looked at him steadily. But they exist, and they've been read by more than one pair of eyes. That last sentence was a lie. She was the only one who had read them. But it was a necessary lie, and she said it with complete calm, because the thing about a bluff was that it only failed if the other person was certain it was one. Thorne was not certain. She could see it in the way his jaw tightened just slightly before he recovered. Then I look forward to reviewing them, he said pleasantly, through proper legal channels, as these things should be handled. Of course, Lily said, proper legal channels, like the ones my father used in 1881. One of the men halfway down the table let out a short breath, not quite a laugh, but close. He covered it with his napkin. His wife looked at him sideways. Thorne heard it. His eyes moved to the source and back. And in that single movement, something shifted in the room. The balance of it, the invisible architecture of who was in command of this evening shifted just enough that people felt it without being able to name it. Cole felt it. He picked up his wineglass, took one slow sip, and set it back down without a word. But the gesture said something. It said, I'm not leaving. I'm not backing down. And I'm watching every single thing that happens next. Dinner continued. It had to. Food kept arriving. Wine kept being poured, and the machinery of the evening ground forward because that was what these things did. They continued, whether the people inside them were comfortable or not. But the texture of the room had changed. Conversations that had been smooth and easy developed edges. People spoke carefully, chose their words with a new precision, angled their chairs slightly, Those near Thorn pulled fractionally closer. Those on the table's margins pulled fractionally back. The geometry of power was readjusting itself in real time, and everyone in that room who had spent their lives reading rooms could feel it happening. A man named Caldwell, who handled property assessments for the county, had been quiet for the last 15 minutes. He sat 3 seats from Thorn, and he was the kind of man, meticulous, precise, professionally anxious, who went pale when things got unpredictable. He'd gone pale 12 minutes ago and hadn't recovered. His wife noticed. She leaned close to him and said something very quietly. He shook his head. She pressed his forearm and said something else. Cole noticed Caldwell. He didn't stare, just registered him the way you register a loose board in a floor. Filed him away. Lily noticed Cole noticing. She kept eating. She kept her face composed. But beneath the table, her hands were not entirely still. She pressed them flat against her thighs, felt the cotton of the dress against her palms, breathed carefully. Because what she had just done, what she had just said out loud in front of 40 people, was not something she could take back. And she had known walking into this room that there was a version of tonight that ended very badly for her. Lost wages, lost room, lost the fragile, careful life she'd been constructing since her father died. But there was also another version, and she had decided alone in her attic room with those copies spread across the floor that the other version was worth the risk. She just had to stay calm long enough to find out which version this was. It was Thorne's wife, Elaine, who moved first. Elaine Thorne was not a stupid woman. She had been married to Marcus for 31 years, which meant she had spent 31 years watching him manage situations, watching him read rooms and redirect conversations and charm problems into submission. She knew exactly what her husband looked like when something had gone sideways on him, the particular set of his shoulders, the way his left hand rested on the table too carefully. She had arranged Lily Harper's attendance tonight. She had chosen her as the weapon. She was therefore responsible for the fact that the weapon had turned around. She rose from her chair with the graceful purpose of a woman who had hosted 100 of these evenings and knew how to reset one. "Shall we give the table a moment?" she said brightly, addressing no one in particular, and therefore everyone. "I believe there are refreshments set up in the sitting room. Ladies, would you join me?" It was a social maneuver. Pull the women out. Let the men recalibrate. Give Thorne the space to handle what needed handling. It would have worked beautifully if the woman she most needed to move was the kind of woman who could be moved by a social maneuver. Lily did not stand. She stayed in her chair, hands folded on the table, and looked at Elaine Thorne with an expression of polite curiosity. "I'm fine here, thank you." Elaine's smile flickered. Just once. "Of course," she said with exactly the right warmth to cover it. "There's no obligation." She swept the other women out with her the way you sweep a hem through a doorway, smooth and practiced and final. And the table became a room of men, plus Lily Harper sitting quietly at one end of it, like she'd always planned to be exactly there. Cole turned to look at her. Not discreetly. He looked at her directly, and there was something in his expression that she hadn't seen from a man in a long time. Not pity, not patronizing concern, not even admiration exactly. Something closer to respect and the specific surprise that came with it when you hadn't expected to find it. "You didn't go," he said low enough that only she could hear. "No," she said. "You knew what that was." "Yes." He looked at her for one more second, then turned back to the table. "All right," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. "All right then." Thorne poured his own brandy. That was the first sign that his composure was working harder than it looked. He usually let staff handle that, and the fact that he reached for the decanter himself was small, but telling. "Bennett," he said, addressing Cole directly. "I think we've gotten rather off track this evening. What I'd hoped was a chance for a straightforward conversation has become, well," he gestured vaguely, "complicated." "It's been clarifying," Cole said. "Has it?" Thorne's tone was pleasant, but the pleasantness had a floor now, and they were close to it. "Then let me be direct. I'm offering you fair market value for the eastern water rights, 50% above what they were assessed at last year. That's a generous offer, and you know it. The assessment was done by a county official who's sitting 3 seats from you, Cole said. So I'd want someone else to tell me what's generous. Caldwell, 3 seats away, became very interested in his brandy. That's a serious implication, Thorne said. You used that word earlier, Lily said, not looking up from her water glass. Serious. You say it right before you try to make someone feel they've overstepped. Thorne looked at her. The room held its breath. Miss Harper, he said, and now the warmth was entirely gone, and what was underneath it was cold and flat and very certain of itself. You are here as a courtesy. I would ask you to remember that. I'm here because your wife paid me $5 and gave me a dress, Lily said. That's not courtesy. That's a transaction. And since we're talking about transactions, the water rights on the Callaway tributary were worth exactly what the original independent survey said they were worth, which was considerably more than what your company offered my father before you filed that counterclaim. I have that survey too. The cold thing in Thorne's eyes became something else, something that was not quite anger, but was the container anger was kept in. You have been very busy, he said. I've had a lot of evenings alone, she said. I read. Pain cleared his throat. He had the instinct of a political animal he could smell when a situation was about to turn from manageable to documented, and documented was the kind of thing that followed a man. Marcus, he said low and careful. Perhaps this is a conversation better suited to. Sit down, Gerald, Thorne said. Payne sat down. That one moment, Thorne telling a senator to sit down, and the senator sitting, told Cole more than anything else that had happened in the last hour. Because powerful men didn't tell senators what to do in public unless they had something on them. And senators didn't comply unless the something was significant. He filed that away too. Miss Harper, Thorne said, and now he was speaking the way a man speaks when he has decided to stop using manners as a shield and start using them as a warning. I understand you believe you have something. Some papers, some filings, some story you've put together from what you found in the courthouse. And I understand that you're angry about your father, which is entirely natural. He was your father. But what you're suggesting tonight in front of these people is a criminal allegation against me. And I want you to understand what that means for a young woman in your position. He let that sit. Let it settle over the table like cold air. He was good at it. Even Lily felt it, the weight of it, the sheer accumulated gravity of what he represented. The money, the lawyers, the 30 years of political relationships. The way a town like Red Hollow had been built piece by piece out of decisions that Marcus Thorne had either made or approved. She felt it, and then she breathed through it. My position, she said, is that I have nothing left to lose. You already took it. She looked at him across the table, and her voice was completely even. My father lost his land, his water rights, his savings, and then he lost his health, and then he died. He died owing the doctor $12.40, and I paid that out of 3 weeks of grain store wages. She paused. What exactly do you think you can threaten me with, Mr. Thorne? What is it you imagine I'm protecting? The room was absolutely silent. Even the man who had covered his laugh with a napkin was not laughing now. Cole had stopped pretending to be uninvolved. He turned in his chair slightly toward Lily, and his shoulder was close enough to hers that it was almost touching. Not quite, but almost. A physical statement. Not aggressive, not performative. Just present. Thorne saw it. His eyes moved from Lily to Cole and back, and something shifted in his calculation. Because Cole Bennett with water rights was a problem. Cole Bennett aligned with someone who had documentation was a different category of problem entirely. This evening, Thorne said slowly, has gotten rather away from us. That happens, Cole said, when the plan goes wrong. Yeah, it was the calmness that did it. Not aggression, not accusation, just Cole sitting there being entirely calm and entirely unmoved, the way a fence post is unmoved by weather. It was the calmness that finally cracked something loose in Reginald Marsh, who sat at the far end of the table and had not said a single word since Lily started talking about the filing dates. Marsh was 64 years old. He had been a land broker in Wyoming Territory for 30 of those years. He had done business with Marcus Thorne for 22 of them, and he had always known on some level that he'd kept carefully below the surface of his daily thinking certain things about how that business worked. He pushed his chair back from the table. It scraped. The sound was loud in the silence, and everyone looked at him. Reg Thorne said, a note of warning threaded through his first name. Marsh looked at Lily. "How old were you when your father lost the land?" Lily blinked. The question came from a direction she hadn't been watching. 21, she said. "And you've been pulling records since then?" Yes. Marsh was quiet for a moment. He had the look of a man doing something that his body was resisting, jaw-tight, shoulders forward, the physical sensation of pushing against your own long habit of staying quiet. "The Hendricks property," he said. "On the North Fork, 1879. Thorne went very still. "There was a survey discrepancy there too," Marsh said. "I signed off on it. I was told the original survey had been miscalculated. I was told." He stopped, started again. "I didn't check. Reginald." Thorne's voice was blade flat now. "This is not the... I was told a lot of things over 22 years, Marsh said, still looking at Lily, not at Thorne. "You're the first person I've seen who sat down and checked." The silence that followed was different from all the previous silences. Those had been tense, charged, full of people deciding which way to lean. This one was the silence of something breaking open, not loudly, not dramatically, but the way a seam gives when the pressure behind it finally exceeds what the stitching can hold. Cole looked at Marsh. "How many properties?" Marsh shook his head slowly. Not the head shake of a man who didn't know. The head shake of a man who knew and was still deciding how much of it to say out loud. "Reginald," Thorne said again, and now his voice had dropped to something barely above a murmur, which was quieter and more frightening than anything louder would have been. "We have been friends and partners for a very long time. I am asking you as your friend to let this evening end." Marsh looked at him for a long moment. "I know you are," he said, and he sat back down. The moment closed. The seam that had started to give went quiet again. But it had given, even a little. And Lily had seen it. Cole had seen it. And more importantly, everyone else at that table had seen it too. Thorne stood. He did it smoothly, with the controlled authority of a man who had decided the evening was over, because he had decided it, and therefore it was. "I think we've exhausted the productive portion of the evening," he said. "Gentlemen, I apologize for the unexpected turn. Bennett, I hope we can arrange a more private conversation in the coming days. My offer stands." He looked at Lily one final time, and what was in his face now was not warmth, was not pretend regret, was nothing performed at all. It was just a plain, direct warning, the kind that didn't need words, because the power behind it was self-evident. Then he walked to the door, and his people followed, and the evening cracked apart the way these things do when the center of them decides to leave. People moved. Chairs scraped. Voices came back in low, careful clusters. The urgent kind, the kind where people were already deciding what they would say tomorrow about what they had witnessed tonight. Caldwell left quickly, almost before Thorne had finished standing, without looking at anyone. Payne lingered, spoke quietly to two men Cole didn't know, and then left with the particular fast walk of a man who needed to make a phone call but didn't have a telephone nearby. Marsh sat at the table a minute longer than anyone else. He looked at the door Thorne had gone through. Then he looked at Lily. "Your father's name was James," he said. "Yes," she said. "He filed a complaint with the county recorder's office in September of 1881, Marsh said. 4 days later, the complaint was withdrawn. The withdrawal was signed with his name." Lily stared at him. Something went cold in her face, cold and absolutely focused. "He didn't withdraw it," she said. "He didn't sign that." Marsh nodded slowly. "No," he said. "I don't think he did." He stood, put on his hat, and walked out of the room without another word. The room was almost empty now. Cole and Lily sat in the remains of the dinner table glasses, half-full plates, half-cleared candles burning down, and neither of them said anything for a long moment. Then Cole said, "That withdrawal, is it in the records?" "I've seen it." Her voice was controlled, but just barely. I thought my father had given up. I thought he'd decided to stop fighting." She stopped, pressed her lips together. "I thought that was just who he was at the end. Someone who gave up." "He didn't give up," Cole said. "No," she said. "Someone signed his name on a document and filed it, and he died not knowing that his complaint was sitting there forged in a courthouse drawer." She looked at Cole, and her eyes were dry and very steady, which was more devastating than tears would have been. "And now I know who had reason to do it." Cole looked at her for a long moment, and then he said something that surprised her. "What do you need? Not what are you going to do? Not be careful. Not even that's terrible. I'm sorry, just the flat, direct, practical question of someone who had already decided which side of this he was on." Lily blinked. It took her a full second to process it. "I need a lawyer," she said. "A good one, not from Red Hollow." "I know one in Cheyenne," Cole said. "Honest man, worked land cases." He paused. "He'll want the originals, not just copies." "I have the originals," she said. He looked at her. "You said copies earlier." "I know what I said." A beat. "I said it in front of Marcus Thorne." Cole was quiet for 3 full seconds. Then a short, quiet sound came from somewhere in his chest. Not quite a laugh, but the closest thing to one this evening had produced. "You walked in here knowing all of this," he said. "Knowing what they'd arranged. Knowing you'd have to sit in that room and—" "I walked in here because I needed to see his face," she said simply. "When he realized, I knew. I needed to see it before he could prepare for it." She looked down at her hands folded on the table. "I've been preparing for 2 years. I thought he deserved at least one night without preparation." Cole looked at her the way you look at something that has just shown you a capacity you didn't know it had. "The dress," he said. "The $5. You took them knowing." "The dress is borrowed," she said. "And I'll return the $5. She paused. "Eventually." He was quiet again. Then, "My ranch, the eastern boundary, the water rights. If what you have holds up legally, it will," she said. "Then he's been building on stolen foundations for years," Cole said. "Not just your father, not just me. Not just the Hendricks property either," she said quietly. "Marsh named that one, but I've found 4 others." Cole stood. He pushed his chair back, slowly stood to his full height, and looked toward the door that Thorne had walked through. His expression was not angry. It was something quieter than anger and more durable, the kind of resolve that doesn't spike and burn out, but settles in for a long campaign. "Miss Harper," he said, "I think you should not walk home alone tonight." She looked up at him. "I've been walking alone for 2 years." "I know," he said, "and you've clearly been managing just fine." He reached for his coat, which had been folded over the back of his chair, and put it on. "But Thorne just watched a room full of his people watch you take the first public swing at him. And he has between now and tomorrow morning to decide how to respond to that." He looked at her steadily. "So I'd rather walk you home, if you don't object." She studied him for a moment. Then she picked up her small bag from beside her chair and stood. "I don't object," she said. They walked out of the hall together, and behind them, the last of the candles on the long table burned in the empty room, and the remains of the spring banquet of 1884 sat undisturbed, and somewhere in Red Hollow, Marcus Thorne was already on his second brandy and his first plan. The night air hit them the moment they stepped outside, cold and sharp after the overheated closeness of Thorne Manor, and neither of them spoke for the first half block. There was nothing performative about the silence. It was just 2 people walking and thinking, carrying the weight of the last 2 hours. The way you carry something heavy that you've been holding for a while and haven't yet decided where to set down. Cole walked on the outside of the wooden sidewalk. He did it without thinking, the automatic placement of a man raised to put himself between a woman and the street. Lily noticed. She didn't say anything about it. You said 4 others, Cole said finally. Besides the Hendricks property and your father's land. Yes. Names. Brewster on the South Ridge. The Almeida family, they left the territory in '82. I don't know where they went. A man named Tolbert who died the following winter, and a small parcel that was held by a woman named Ruth Connolly, a widow. She's still in town. She takes in laundry on Birch Street. Cole was quiet for a moment, turning that over. 6 properties. That I've found, Lily said. I don't think I've found all of them. They walked. A dog barked somewhere down a side street and then went quiet. The town of Red Hollow at 10 o'clock was mostly closed and mostly dark, the kind of small-town dark that was absolute in its corners and amber-lit only in the saloon windows they passed. Thorne's been here 20 years, Cole said. 23, Lily said. He filed his first land acquisition in April of 1861. I pulled that too. Cole glanced at her sideways. How much time have you spent in that courthouse? A lot, she said simply. Mr. Culver closes the store at 5. The courthouse records room is open until 6 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She paused. I told Mr. Culver I was attending a Bible study. Cole made that sound again, the one that wasn't quite a laugh. And he believed you. He didn't care enough to check, she said without bitterness. Just fact. They reached the corner where she needed to turn toward the boarding house, and she stopped. He stopped with her. The lawyer in Cheyenne, she said. What's his name? Arthur Briggs. He handled a water dispute in Laramie County 3 years ago. The other side had more money and more connections, and he still won. Cole paused. He's not cheap. How not cheap? A retainer would likely run $50, maybe more depending on how complicated the filings are. $50. She made $3.40 a week at the grain store. She did the arithmetic in her head without showing it on her face, which was something she'd had a lot of practice at. I'll find it, she said. I'll cover the retainer, Cole said. She looked at him sharply. No. Lily. No, she said again, and her voice was firm without being unkind. I appreciate it. But if Briggs is working this case, and Thorne finds out, which he will, because Thorne finds out everything, the first thing Thorne will do is argue that you bought my testimony. That I'm your instrument, not an independent witness. She looked at him steadily. You need me to be independent, completely, or none of this holds. Cole held her gaze. Then he exhaled, slow and controlled. You've thought about this. I've thought about all of it, she said, for a very long time. A pause. The street was empty in both directions, and the cold had found its way through the blue cotton dress. But she didn't move, didn't wrap her arms around herself, didn't show any of it. Then what can I do? Cole said. Cole. Go home, she said. Don't contact Briggs yet. Don't contact anyone. Give me 3 days to get the originals to a safe place before Thorne has time to figure out where I keep them. He might already be figuring that out. I know, she said. That's why I'm not going back to the boarding house tonight. Cole went very still. Where are you going? I have a plan, she said. That's all you need to know right now. The less you know about the specifics, the less Thorne can leverage out of you. He didn't like that. She could see it in the set of his jaw, the brief forward lean of a man who was accustomed to being in the middle of things and not on the edges of them. But she was learning a man who could override what he didn't like when the logic was sound. 3 days, he said. 3 days, she confirmed. And if I don't hear from you, then something has gone wrong, and you should contact Briggs yourself with whatever you have. She held out her hand. He looked at it for a moment, then shook it, the firm, square grip of someone being taken seriously, not handled. Good night, Mr. Bennett. Cole, he said. She looked at him. Good night, Cole. She turned the corner and walked away, and he stood on that sidewalk and watched until the dark took her. And then he stood there a moment longer anyway, because the evening had handed him something he hadn't come looking for, and he needed a second to understand what it weighed. She did not go back to the boarding house. She went to the church. Not for prayer, though she didn't rule it out entirely, but because Reverend Miles, who was 71 and half-deaf, and could not have been bribed or threatened by Marcus Thorne if Thorne had tried for a decade, kept the side vestry unlocked for exactly the kind of person who needed somewhere to be that wasn't where they were supposed to be. Lily had figured this out 6 months earlier and had never used it until tonight. She sat on a wooden bench in the dark and took the papers out. They had been folded flat inside the bodice of the borrowed dress against her skin, warm and slightly damp at the edges from the heat of the banquet hall, but intact. She unfolded them carefully and went through them one more time in the dark from memory, because she had read them so many times she could have recited them without looking. The original filing. Her father's signature shaky because he had bad arthritis by 1881, but absolutely his. The counterfiling with its impossible date. The independent survey that had been requested, and then according to the record never officially submitted, except it had been, and she had found the submission confirmation in a separate drawer where it had been misfiled, and she wasn't sure whether that misfiling was accidental or deliberate, but she had her suspicion. And the withdrawal. Her father's name signed in handwriting that was close, but not quite right. Close enough to fool a tired clerk. Not close enough to fool a daughter who had been reading her father's handwriting her whole life. She sat with that document for a long time. Long enough that the cold really got into her bones, and her hands stiffened and she had to blow on them to keep them flexible. She had thought, when she first found the withdrawal, that she had been wrong about her father. That the man who had raised her, who had read land law books by lamplight, and argued every point in those filings with the precise passion of someone who believed in the system, that man had simply crumbled in the end. Had given up. Had signed his name to something that undid everything he'd worked for, and then never told her about it. She had carried that for over a year. The grief of it, and the confusion of it, and the quiet, shameful suspicion that perhaps she had never really known him as well as she thought. That the father she remembered and the man who had ultimately capitulated were the same man, and she had just loved the first version too much to see the second one clearly. And then she had looked more closely at the signature, and she had known. The way you know a forgery in a loved one's handwriting, not from any expertise, not from any training, but from years and years of watching the same hand move across the same paper, and knowing in your body the exact weight and habit and rhythm of it. Her father had pressed hard on his downstrokes and light on his curves. This signature was the opposite. Someone had practiced. Someone had gotten close, but not close enough. She folded the papers back, tucked them into the inside pocket of the small bag she'd carried into the banquet, the one thing the Thornes hadn't provided, the one thing that was entirely hers. Then she sat in the dark and let herself feel it. Not the anger which she had used as fuel all evening and needed to carefully ration. Not the fear which was present and real, and which she had no intention of pretending otherwise. But the grief which was the oldest and most honest thing, and which she had been keeping at arm's length through sheer force of logistics and research, and the consuming project of being busy enough not to feel it. Her father had not given up. He had been erased. And there was a certain terrible clarifying relief in that, in knowing that the man she remembered had been exactly who she thought. That she hadn't been wrong about him. That he had fought until someone had fought for him with a forged pen, and that the loss of everything was not a failure of his character, but a crime committed against it. She pressed both hands flat on her thighs and breathed. Then she put the grief away precisely and carefully, the way you put something irreplaceable somewhere safe, and she started thinking about the next 72 hours. Cole got back to his ranch at midnight and found Dutch in the kitchen. Dutch had a coffee pot on the stove and the specific alert stillness of a man who had not been sleeping, which meant he'd been waiting. He looked at Cole's face and didn't ask how the evening went, because Cole's face answered it well enough. "Sit," Dutch said. Cole sat. Dutch poured 2 cups and set one in front of him. "Thorne made his move," Dutch said. "Tried to." Cole wrapped both hands around the cup. "It didn't go the way he planned. Because of you. Because of a girl named Lily Harper." Cole looked at his coffee. James Harper's daughter. Dutch was quiet for a moment. I remember James Harper. Quiet man. Good land instincts. Lost his water rights in '81 and never recovered. He didn't lose them, Cole said. They were taken, counterfiled with a fraudulent date stamp, and the complaint he filed about it was withdrawn with a forged signature. He looked up. Lily has the original documents. She's been building a case for 2 years. Dutch sat down slowly across from him. Alone. Completely alone. Cole said it with the same quiet weight it deserved. She walked into that banquet tonight knowing she was bait. Thorne's wife paid her $5 to sit next to me and be embarrassing. She took the $5 and then took the whole room apart. Dutch stared at him. How old is she? 23. Dutch made a sound that was somewhere between respect and something heavier. What does she need? A lawyer. Money she won't take from me for the right reasons. Cole set his cup down. And 3 days of nobody knowing where she's keeping those documents. She's not going home tonight. No. Dutch nodded slowly. That was all he said about it because Dutch was a man who understood the difference between questions that needed asking and questions that were just anxiety wearing the costume of curiosity. Thorne's going to come at you next, Dutch said. Not at her, not yet. At you first because you're the one he can attach a price tag to. He'll push on the water rights offer and make it uglier if you say no. I know. And if you refuse... Cole looked at him. Then he escalates. Dutch picked up his coffee. What are we going to do? Cole was quiet for a long moment. The fire in the stove ticked and settled. Outside, the Wyoming night was absolutely still. We're going to give Thorne 3 days of thinking he's still in control, Cole said. And then we're going to let Arthur Briggs take the first legal shot. He paused. And then we'll see what shakes loose. Dutch looked at him. You already know Briggs. He handled my original survey dispute in '79, before I had enough money to fight back properly. He got me what I needed on a handshake deal and settled the bill 2 years later when I could manage it. Cole paused. He'll take this case. You're sure? Not for my sake. Cole stood, picked up his coat. Because of what it is. Briggs has been practicing law in this territory for 18 years. He has a particular reaction to forged documents. He headed for the stairs. Get some sleep, Dutch. Tomorrow we act like nothing happened. And if Thorne sends someone... Cole stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Send them back with my apologies and my schedule for next week. Polite as you can manage. And if they're not polite about asking, a beat. Then be less polite about sending them back. 3 days passed. They passed the way the 3 most tense days of your life always do agonizingly, in the moments you were paying attention, and then suddenly all at once, gone. Cole heard nothing from Lily. He heard nothing from Thorne directly, though he heard plenty about Thorne from Dutch, who picked up the town's whisper current at the feed store, from a neighbor rancher who'd been at the county registrar's office and noticed 2 men he didn't recognize going through property records, from the barman at the Red Hollow Saloon, who told Dutch, who told Cole, that Senator Payne had left town on the Wednesday stage and hadn't said when he'd be back. Payne leaving was interesting. Payne leaving without announcement was more than interesting. Cole filed it in the same part of his thinking where he'd already filed Caldwell's Paller Marsh's confession and the fact that Thorne had told a senator to sit down and the senator had sat. On the 3rd day, a Thursday, Cole was at the eastern fence line when he heard a horse. He turned, and it was Dutch riding faster than Dutch usually rode, which told him everything before Dutch said a word. Someone tried to get into her boarding house room last night, Dutch said, pulling up. Mrs. Plank, who runs the place, found the lock broken this morning. Lily Harper wasn't there. She hasn't been there, Cole said. Right, but whoever broke in didn't know that. Dutch caught his breath. Mrs. Plank is talking. Half the town already knows something happened. Cole pulled on his gloves. Where is she? That's the thing, Dutch said. She came to the ranch about an hour ago. She's in the kitchen. She wanted to wait for you. Cole was already moving toward his horse. Lily looked exactly the same as she had Saturday night, which was to say she looked like someone who had not slept much but had declined to advertise it. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she'd made herself, and she had a leather satchel on the table in front of her that she kept her hand on, not clutching, just in contact with the way you keep a hand near something you need to be able to reach quickly. She looked up when Cole came in. "They went to your room," he said. "I expected they might," she said. "That's why I wasn't in it." "Where have you been?" "Reverend Miles's vestry the first 2 nights. Ruth Connolly's house last night." She paused. She was glad for the company. Cole pulled out the chair across from her and sat. He looked at the satchel. "That's them. The originals, plus everything I've compiled." She looked at him steadily. "There's something new." Cole waited. "Marsh came to find me," she said. The sentence landed like a stone dropped into still water. Cole leaned forward slightly. "When?" he said. "Yesterday morning. Ruth told him where to find me. She knows him from some county business years ago. He came alone." Lily's hand pressed flat on the satchel. "He gave me a ledger." Cole stared at her. "What kind of ledger?" "The kind that records payments," she said. "To county officials. Specific amounts, specific dates, specific names." She paused. "Caldwell's name is in it. The clerk who processed the counter filings. 2 judges." She stopped again, and her voice stayed even, but something under it was shaking slightly, not from weakness, from the sheer force of what she was holding. "Gerald Payne's name is in it. Twice." Cole sat back slowly. "Marsh kept a ledger. He said he kept it for protection," Lily said. "He said he always knew somewhere that eventually Thorne would decide he was a liability. He wanted something to hold." She looked at Cole. "He decided Saturday night was the evening he stopped waiting to need it." The kitchen was very quiet. Somewhere outside, a horse shifted its weight and blew. "Payne left town Wednesday," Cole said. "I know," she said. "I think someone told him his name was going to come up. Which means Thorne knows about the ledger, possibly, or Payne is just protecting himself from proximity." She looked down at her hand on the satchel. "Either way, the ledger changes what we have. This isn't a property dispute anymore. It isn't even just fraud." She looked up. "This is a bribery case, a corruption case. Against Thorne, against Payne, against county officials who have been making decisions in this territory for 20 years. She held his gaze. "Cole, if this goes where I think it goes, Thorne won't just fight back through lawyers. He will do whatever he has to do." "I know," Cole said. "I need you to understand what I'm asking you to put yourself in the middle of." "I've been in the middle of it since he started coming after my water rights," Cole said. "I just didn't know how far the middle went." He reached across the table, not for her hand, just for the satchel, setting his hand beside hers on it, the gesture of someone saying, "This is real, and I know it." "I'm going to send a wire to Arthur Briggs today. I want him here by the end of the week." Lily nodded. Then she said quietly, "Marsh is scared." "He should be," Cole said. "He's still willing to testify," she said. "He told me he'd testify to everything in that ledger, every payment, every name, every time he signed something he knew wasn't right." She stopped. He said he was 64 years old, and he'd spent 22 years being the kind of man who looked away, and he'd like to die as something else." The words hung there. Cole said nothing for a moment because sometimes there was nothing to add to something that had that much weight to it. "Then we protect him," Cole said finally. "Same as we protect you. Same as we protect those documents." Lily pulled the satchel slightly closer. "Cole, I want to be clear about something." "Go ahead." "I started this for my father," she said, "because I needed to know the truth and because someone forged his name, and I couldn't let that stay buried." She looked at him directly without flinching. "But it's bigger than my father now. There are 5 other families who lost land. There are county officials who have been on Thorne's payroll. There are decisions that have shaped this entire valley for 20 years that were bought and paid for." She paused. "If we do this, if Briggs takes this to a territorial court, it will be in the papers. Thorne will come after everything you have. Your ranch, your water rights, your reputation. He will try to make you radioactive in this territory. Cole looked at her. Are you trying to talk me out of it? I'm trying to make sure you're choosing it, she said. Not just falling into it because Saturday happened and you're angry. He was quiet for a moment, long enough that she couldn't read what was behind it. Then he said, My ranch foreman has been with me for 9 years. Before that he worked for a man named Samuel Pryor over in Carbon County. You know what happened to Pryor? She shook her head. Thorne's company filed a survey dispute against him in 1877, tied him up in legal proceedings for 3 years. By the end of it, Pryor didn't have enough left to keep his crew through winter. He sold at 10 cents on the dollar and left the territory. Cole kept his eyes on hers. Dutch never said it was Thorne specifically. He didn't have proof. But he moved to my ranch because he needed work, and because he said something to me the first week he was there that I never forgot. He paused. He said the only thing that makes a man like that unstoppable is that everybody who could stop him decides stopping him isn't worth the cost. Cole held her gaze. I've been thinking about that for 9 years. I think it's time to find out what the cost actually is. Lily looked at him for a long moment. Something in her face shifted. Not broke open, not softened dramatically. Just shifted the way something shifts when a weight you've been carrying without knowing, it gets taken off by 1 fraction. All right, she said. All right, he said. She opened the satchel. She started laying documents on the table one by one, and Cole pulled his chair around to her side so they could look at them together. And they sat there going through 2 years of her work in the gray morning light. And outside Red Hollow went about its business, and somewhere across town, Marcus Thorne was already on his 3rd conversation of the morning, pulling levers that he still believed were attached to things. He hadn't yet understood that on Saturday night, something had broken loose in the machinery of his world. He hadn't understood it yet, but he would. The wire to Briggs went out Thursday afternoon. Cole sent it from the telegraph office himself in plain language, which was itself a message, not coded, not routed through anyone else, just his name and Briggs's name, and 4 words. I need you immediately. Briggs wired back inside of 2 hours. 3 words, on the morning stage. Dutch, who was waiting at the telegraph office with Cole, read the response over his shoulder and let out a slow breath. Fast, he said. Briggs has been waiting for something like this, Cole said. He just didn't know what it would look like when it arrived. They walked back to the ranch in the late afternoon light, and Cole was quiet most of the way, which Dutch respected because he understood that Cole was not a man who went quiet when he was afraid. He went quiet when he was working something out, organizing the territory of a thing in his mind, the way you organize land, where the boundaries were, where the high ground was, where the water ran. And Lily was at the ranch when they got back. She had asked without preamble if she could stay, and Cole had said yes, and Dutch had made up the spare room with the efficiency of a man who asked no unnecessary questions. She had eaten supper with them and said very little, and after supper she had gone back to the table and the documents and kept working because she was... Cole was understanding the kind of person who processed difficulty through action rather than through talk. He found her there at 10 o'clock when Dutch had gone to bed. You should sleep, he said. I will, she said, not looking up. I want to organize this in the order Briggs will need it, so we don't waste his time when he gets here. Cole stood behind her for a moment, looking at the spread of papers, the filings, the survey records, the Marsh ledger, the withdrawal with its not quite right signature. 2 years of her alone in a courthouse records room, copying documents by hand because she couldn't afford a camera reproduction. 2 years of grain store wages and an attic room and a careful, persistent, utterly quiet campaign against something enormous. You know, he said when Thorne arranged this on Saturday, when he decided you were the right tool for the job. She looked up. He made that decision because he looked at you and saw someone who had nothing, Cole said. No connections, no money, no family. He saw the most harmless thing he could imagine. He paused. He was so wrong about that it almost makes you feel sorry for him. Lily looked at him for a moment. Then she said quietly, Almost. and she went back to work. Arthur Briggs arrived on the Friday morning stage, looking exactly the way Cole had described him. Compact, precise, with the kind of steady eyes that had seen enough courtrooms to stop being impressed by any of them. He was 51 gray at the temples, and he carried one bag and one leather briefcase, and the briefcase was the one he held onto when the stage hit rough ground. Cole met him at the station. They shook hands the way men do when they've done serious business together before. No excess warmth, no performance, just the grip of mutual trust already established. "Wire said immediately," Briggs said. "Meant it," Cole said. "What are we dealing with?" "Forged land filings, fraudulent counterclaims, a bribery ledger with a senator's name in it." Cole picked up Briggs's bag. "And a woman who built the entire case herself in 2 years on a grain store salary." Briggs stopped walking. "How old?" 23. Briggs was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then he picked up his pace. "Let's go." Lily was at the kitchen table when they came in. She had the documents organized in 3 separate stacks, each one held together with a length of twine she'd borrowed from Dutch, each stack ordered chronologically from earliest to most recent. When Briggs walked in, she stood. She didn't extend her hand immediately. She waited to see how he came at her. He came at her directly. He looked at the documents before he looked at her face, which she took as a professional courtesy rather than a slight. Then he looked at her. "Miss Harper," he said. "Mr. Briggs. Cole tells me you've been working this alone." "Yes." "How did you know what to look for?" "My father talked about land law the way other men talk about weather," she said, "constantly and with strong opinions. I grew up knowing how filings worked. After he lost everything, I wanted to understand why." She paused. The why took a while to find. Briggs pulled out the chair across from her and sat down without being invited, which was the right move, because it told her he was already treating this as a working conversation and not an evaluation. She sat back down. "Walk me through it," he said. "From the beginning. Don't leave anything out." She walked him through it. It took 40 minutes. Cole and Dutch stayed in the kitchen, but moved to the far end of it close enough if needed out of the way on purpose. Briggs asked questions, sharp, specific questions that went straight to the legal pressure points, and Lily answered every one of them without hesitation, without looking at her notes, because she didn't need to. It was all in her head, organized and precise, the product of 2 years of obsessive, careful attention. When she finished, Briggs sat back and looked at the 3 stacks of documents. He didn't speak for almost a full minute. Dutch shifted his weight. Cole stayed still. "The ledger," Briggs said finally. "Marsh gave it to you voluntarily." "Yes." "And he's willing to testify." "He said so. Whether he'll hold when Thorne's lawyers start working on him is another question." Briggs nodded. "The forged withdrawal. You're certain it's a forgery?" "I'm certain," she said. "I know my father's handwriting." "That's not enough in a courtroom," he said. "We'll need a handwriting expert. Independent, not local." He picked up the withdrawal document and looked at it closely, tilting it toward the light from the window. "Though I'll tell you, even from here, the pressure inconsistency on the downstrokes is notable." He set it down. "Who else has seen these documents?" "You, Cole, Dutch, and Marsh, who gave me the ledger." "Anyone in Thorne's circle, not the documents themselves. But Thorne knows I have something. I told him as much Saturday night." Briggs looked at her. "You told him at the banquet." "I needed him to know," she said. "If he didn't know I had documentation, he'd dismiss everything I said as the grieving daughter making accusations. I needed him scared enough to react. And if he'd reacted by having someone take the documents from you, that's why I wasn't in my room," she said. "And that's why they're here." Briggs looked at her steadily for a moment. "You used yourself as bait to force his hand." "He used me as bait first," she said evenly. "I just changed what the bait was for." Something moved in Briggs's face, not quite a smile, but the internal version of one. He looked back at the documents. "All right," he said. "Here's where we stand. The fraudulent counterfiling with the impossible date stamp, that's your strongest piece. A processing date that predates the original submission is not a clerical error. That is documentary evidence of deliberate fraud, and it implicates whoever submitted it and whoever processed it. He tapped the ledger. If this ledger is authentic, and I'll need to examine it fully, and if Marsh testifies to its contents, then we have a bribery case that connects Thorne's land acquisitions to paid interference by county officials. He looked at Lily. What you have, Miss Harper, is enough to open a territorial investigation, maybe more. The kitchen was very quiet. Maybe more, Cole said from across the room. What does more look like? It looks like federal involvement, Briggs said, if the fraud crosses enough county lines and involves enough property value, which from what I'm seeing, it likely does. He closed the ledger carefully. I need 2 days to go through everything. Then I need to make 2 trips, one to the county courthouse to pull the originals for comparison and one to find Marsh and confirm his testimony commitment in writing. Thorne will know you're here by tomorrow morning, Dutch said. Good, Briggs said. Let him know. I want him watching me go into that courthouse. I want him to understand that this is a legal proceeding now, not a private dispute. He looked at Cole. The moment he interferes with a witness or attempts to remove or alter public records, he's added obstruction to his problems. And Marcus Thorne is not a man who will be able to resist the instinct to interfere. Cole nodded slowly. You're setting another trap. I'm letting him set it himself, Briggs said. There's a difference. He looked at Lily. You'll stay here? Yes, she said. Don't go into town alone. Don't speak to anyone about the specifics of what we have. If anyone approaches you, you tell me first. He paused. Is that agreeable? It is, she said. He stood, picked up his briefcase. Then let's get to work, Mog. The next 36 hours had the texture of waiting, that was also not waiting, the specific grinding tension of a situation that was moving invisibly underground while the surface stayed still. Cole did his ranch work. Dutch did his. Briggs sat at the kitchen table with the documents spread around him and worked with the methodical focus of a man who had one speed for legal preparation, and it was not a slow one. Lily helped him. She answered questions when he had them, located specific documents when he needed them, and filled the gaps between with her own reading. She'd borrowed 2 of Briggs's law books from his briefcase and was working through the territorial property statutes with the focused attention of someone studying for a test. They absolutely could not fail. On the second evening, Briggs looked up from his work and watched her for a moment. You could study law, he said. She looked up. Women can't practice in this territory. Not yet, he said. The statute is specific, but not permanent. He paused. I have a colleague in Cheyenne, Margaret Voss. She's been arguing for admission to the territorial bar for 3 years. She'll get it eventually. She's considerably more stubborn than the Bar Association. He looked back at his papers. I'm mentioning it. Lily looked at him for a long moment. Then she went back to the statute book, but something in how she held it had shifted, something that was not yet hope exactly, but was the shape of it. Saturday morning. 8 days after the banquet, Briggs went to the courthouse. He went alone, which was deliberate. Cole offered twice to come with him, and Briggs declined twice, because a lawyer entering a courthouse was routine, and a rancher accompanying him was a statement, and Briggs preferred to make statements on his own schedule. He was inside for 3 hours. Cole did not pace. He worked fence in the south pasture, which was something that required enough physical attention to keep his hands busy without fully occupying his mind. Dutch worked beside him, and they didn't talk much, which was fine, because Dutch understood that silence in a man like Cole was not absence, it was presence, the focused internal kind, the kind that was working through something. At noon, a writer came from town, not Briggs. A young man Cole didn't recognize carrying a folded note. He handed it to Cole and rode away without waiting for a reply, which told Cole the note was from someone who didn't want a paper trail on their end. Cole unfolded it, read it, read it again. Dutch watched his face. What? Cole handed him the note. Dutch read it. His jaw tightened. The note said, Caldwell is gone. Left on the Thursday stage with his family. His office has been cleared out. Thorne moved him, Dutch said. Or Caldwell ran, Cole said. Either way, he's out of reach. Does Briggs know? Not yet. Cole folded the note. Caldwell was a witness to the processing of the counterfilings. He's the one who stamped them through. He looked at Dutch. Without his testimony, we lose a direct link between Thorne and the fraudulent processing. Dutch was quiet for a moment. How bad is that? It's not fatal, Cole said with the measured certainty of a man who wasn't entirely sure but needed to sound like he was. The documents themselves still show the date discrepancy. You don't need the clerk to testify when the paperwork condemns itself. He started walking back toward the ranch. But it tells us something. Thorne knows enough about what we have to know which witness to move first. Dutch fell into step beside him. Which means he has someone watching. He's always had someone watching, Cole said. The question is, who told him specifically about Caldwell? He stopped walking. Who knew Caldwell was a weak point? Dutch stopped too. They looked at each other. The question hung between them, and neither of them said the name they were both thinking, because saying it would make it real and real needed proof before it became accusation. I'll make some inquiries, Dutch said carefully. Quietly, Cole said. Always. Briggs came back from the courthouse at 2 o'clock with the expression of a man who had found both more and less than he expected. He sat down, poured his own coffee. He'd stopped waiting to be served after the first day and opened his notes. The original filings are there, he said, intact, which means either Thorne couldn't get to them or decided the risk of tampering with courthouse originals was too high. He looked at his notes. I found something else. Caldwell's gone, Cole said. Briggs looked up. I know. His name appears in 4 separate processing records, and now he's not available to explain them. He set his notes down. But here's what I found. There's a second clerk, a woman named Frances Aldridge who processed the original Harper filing in March of 1881. She's still employed by the county recorder's office. She's been there since 1876. He paused. She initialed the original submission, and her initials do not appear anywhere on the counterfiling. Lily across the table went very still. What does that mean? It means the counterfiling bypassed normal processing procedure, Briggs said. A filing that size on a water rights dispute should have had 2 clerks initial it. Frances Aldridge should have been one of them. She wasn't. He looked at Lily. Which means someone made sure she wasn't on duty that day, or someone processed it through a channel that avoided her desk entirely. He paused again. I spoke to her briefly. She remembered your father's original filing. She said, and this is exact, she said, that was the filing where I had to go home early because my mother was ill. I was out for 3 days. When I came back, Mr. Caldwell told me the matter had been resolved. The kitchen was absolutely silent. She didn't know, Lily said. Her voice was flat and controlled, but her hands on the table had gone white at the knuckles. She didn't know, Briggs confirmed. Caldwell used her absence to push the counterfiling through without the standard dual clerk verification. He looked at Cole. Caldwell leaving is not the blow it appeared to be. Frances Aldridge is a better witness. She has no involvement in the fraud, no payment in the ledger, no reason to lie. She's a county employee of 8 years who was deliberately sidelined on a specific date, and she can testify to that. He paused. And she will, I asked. Cole exhaled slowly. She agreed. She was angry, Briggs said simply and with satisfaction. She's been processing county records with integrity for 8 years, and she does not enjoy learning that her absence was engineered to facilitate fraud. He closed his notes. People underestimate the anger of honest bureaucrats. It is a profound and very useful anger. Lily pressed both hands flat on the table and took a breath. So we have the documents, the date discrepancy, the Marsh ledger, Marsh's testimony, and Frances Aldridge. And we're missing Caldwell, Cole said. We're missing Caldwell, Briggs agreed. But Caldwell running is itself evidence of consciousness of guilt. A man who did nothing wrong doesn't pack his family and leave on 48 hours' notice. He looked at his briefcase. I need to file a formal complaint with the Territorial Attorney General's office. What we have is beyond what a civil suit can adequately address. This needs to go criminal. He looked at both of them. Once I file, everything accelerates. Thorne will know within days, if not hours. His lawyers will be in motion before the ink dries. Whatever he's been planning quietly, he'll start executing loudly. How long before the Attorney General responds? Cole asked. A week if we're lucky. 2 if we're not. Briggs paused. In that window, Thorne will try to discredit everything we have. He'll start with the witnesses. Marsh first. He'll try to establish that Marsh is a disgruntled former associate with a personal grudge. Then Miss Harper. He'll try to establish that she's a grieving daughter with an obsession and no legal standing. He looked at Lily directly. He will be thorough, and he will be personal, and he will try to make you look unstable. Let him try, she said. It will be unpleasant, Briggs said, not as a warning, as information delivered without softening. 2 years of grain store wages was unpleasant, she said. I managed. Briggs nodded once. Decision confirmed. He stood reaching for his coat. I'm going to find Marsh. I need his testimony in a signed affidavit before Thorne gets to him. He looked at Cole. Keep her here. Keep the documents here. Understood. Briggs left. The door closed, and the ranch was quiet except for the ordinary sounds of a working property horses whine, the distant sound of Dutch somewhere doing something practical. Cole looked at Lily. She was looking at the place on the table where the documents had been. Briggs had taken the originals in his briefcase, which was the right call, and which she had agreed to, and which she clearly on some bodily level was fighting the urge to second guess. He's good, Cole said. He knows what he's doing. I know, she said. I'm not worried about Briggs. She looked up. I'm worried about the week between the filing and the response. That's the window where things happen. What kind of things? The kind of things that don't get written down, she said. Visits, pressure, someone having a quiet word with a witness about what they stand to lose. She paused. Marsh is 64, and he spent 22 years building a life in this territory. Thorne only has to make him believe that testifying will cost him the remainder of it. Cole was quiet for a moment. And you? She looked at him. Me. What will Thorne try with you? She thought about it honestly, which he appreciated because he was tired of people in this situation performing courage they didn't completely feel. He'll try to make me feel small again, she said. The way the whole room tried Saturday night before it went wrong. He'll find a way to remind me of everything I don't have. The money, the connections, the name. She paused. The problem for him is that I've been feeling small for 2 years, and I stopped minding. When you stop minding, it stops working. Cole looked at her for a long moment. Something in his chest did the thing it had been doing around her, shifting, adjusting the internal reorganization of a man who is in the process of understanding that someone matters to him in a way that has no clean category. He didn't say any of that. He said, "Are you hungry?" Dutch left stew on the stove. She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "Actually, yes." He got up and got the stew. They ate at the kitchen table with the afternoon light coming in and the documents gone to Briggs's briefcase, and for a few minutes it was just 2 people eating, which was its own kind of relief. Marsh signed the affidavit on Sunday morning. Briggs brought it back to the ranch, sealed the wax stamp of a notary public from 2 towns over, pressed firm into the corner Marsh's signature below it in the deliberate heavy hand of a man who has made a decision and is not going back. Lily held it for a moment before she set it down. "He held," she said. "He held," Briggs confirmed. "Though not without cost. Thorne's man visited him Saturday evening. I don't know what was said, but Marsh looked like a man who'd been through a storm when I got there Sunday. He still signed." "What's going to happen to him?" Lily asked. "Legally, nothing. He's cooperating with an investigation, not being charged. Professionally," Briggs paused, "he's finished in this territory as a broker. Thorne will make sure of that. He knows it. He signed anyway." He set his briefcase on the table. "I'm filing the complaint Monday, First stage out. Cole nodded. And we wait. And we wait, Briggs said. But not passively. I want to locate the Brewster family and the Almeida family. If they lost land the same way Harper did, their documentation is additional pattern evidence. Pattern evidence matters. It changes the story from one bad actor on one bad day to a systematic operation over years. He looked at Lily. Brewster, you said he's still in the territory. I believe he's in Casper, she said. I have an address. It's 18 months old. I'll find him. Briggs reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folded paper. He set it in front of Lily. I also had a document prepared. I'd like you to review it. She unfolded it, read it again. Her face, which had stayed controlled through everything, changed just slightly, just at the edges, the way a face changes when it encounters something it wasn't prepared for. This names me as a formal complainant, she said. Yes. Not just a witness, a complainant. You are the person who discovered the fraud, compiled the evidence, and brought it forward, Briggs said. You have standing. The law in this territory allows a private complainant to initiate a fraud proceeding. He paused. Your name will be on the filing, in the public record, permanently. She folded the document back carefully along its original creases. She set it on the table. She looked at it for a moment. My father's name will be in it too, she said. As the primary victim of the Harper filing fraud, yes, Briggs said. James Harper will be named. His case will be at the center of the proceeding. She was quiet for a long moment. Cole watched her and said nothing, because this was not a moment that wanted commentary from the outside. It was a moment that belonged entirely to her. He died owing the doctor $12.40. She said not to either of them, just out loud. He died thinking he'd lost, thinking he'd failed. She pressed her lips together, steadied. I want his name in it. It will be, Briggs said. She picked up the pen he'd set beside the document. She signed it. Her signature was clear, even and absolutely certain, the signature of a woman who has been moving toward this moment for 2 years and is not surprised to have arrived at it, only relieved. Richard. Monday came, and Briggs left on the early stage with his briefcase and his documents and Marsh's affidavit, and the ranch settled into the particular stillness of a situation that has done everything it can do for the moment and is now in the hands of a larger machinery. Cole stood on the porch and watched the stage go. Dutch stood beside him. How long before Thorne makes a move? Dutch said. He's already making moves, Cole said. We just won't see them until they're finished. He turned back toward the house. Keep an eye on the eastern fence line. If anyone comes onto the property uninvited, I want to know immediately. I think he's spent 23 years getting what he wants by controlling what information reaches people and when, Cole said. He can't control this anymore. That makes him unpredictable. He paused. Unpredictable is the most dangerous version of him. Dutch nodded. And Lily. Cole looked at the house. Through the front window he could see her at the table, still working. Always working the way she had been since the night she first laid those documents out in front of Briggs. She had started writing something the day before, a personal account, she said, of every step of her investigation, the dates, the locations, the specific records she'd pulled, and why. A narrative to accompany the legal documents. Briggs had asked for it. She was producing it with the same exhaustive precision she'd applied to everything else. She's not someone who needs protecting, Cole said, still looking at her through the window. She needs people to stop standing in front of her. Dutch considered that. And you stopping in front of her? Cole was quiet for a moment. Trying not to, he said. Trying to stand beside her instead. He paused. It's a different thing. Dutch looked at him sideways. Is it working? Ask me in a week, Cole said, and went inside. The telegram arrived Thursday. Cole was in the barn when Dutch brought it, and the speed at which Dutch was walking told him everything before he read it. He took it and read it standing up. It was not from Briggs. It was from a name he didn't recognize, a man in Cheyenne, a clerk of some kind who gave no explanation for how he had Cole's name or why he was writing only 2 sentences. The filing was received Monday. An inquiry has been opened by the Territorial Attorney General's office. You should know that Senator Payne was in this office Wednesday. Cole read it twice. Folded it. Payne was in Cheyenne. Payne, whose name was in the ledger, whose name was on a payment record dated 1882, was in the Territorial Attorney General's office 2 days after Briggs's complaint was filed. He walked to the house. Lily was at the table. He set the telegram in front of her without a word. She read it. Her face went very still. "He's trying to get ahead of it," she said. "Before the investigation formally names him, he wants to be the one who walked in voluntarily. He wants to look cooperative instead of implicated." "Can he do that?" Cole said. "Can he walk in and change the shape of this?" Lily looked at the telegram. "He can try," she said. "If he gives them something bigger than himself, if he names Thorne, confirms the payments, positions himself as a witness rather than a defendant." She stopped. "He could negotiate his way out of the worst of it." Cole looked at her. "Would that be the worst thing if Payne turns on Thorne?" She thought about it. Really thought about it, not just the immediate gut reaction. "No," she said finally. "If Payne testifies against Thorne, it's actually stronger for us. A senator confirming what the ledger says, that's not something Thorne can dismiss or explain away." She paused. "But it means Thorne is about to find out the full extent of what's against him, and he'll know the window for quiet solutions is closed." "Then we're past the point of this staying manageable for him," Cole said. "Yes," she said. "We are." Cole sat down across from her. "He's going to come at us directly now. Not through lawyers, not through whispers. Directly." She met his eyes. "I know." "Are you ready for that?" She looked at him steadily, and what was in her face was not fearlessness. It was something more durable than fearlessness. Something that had been forged over 2 years of being alone and dismissed and underestimated, and still showing up every Tuesday and Thursday to copy land records by hand in a courthouse records room. "I've been ready since the night I found that forged signature," she said. "I was just waiting for the rest of the pieces." Cole held her gaze. And then he said quietly and with complete certainty the thing that had been true since the night he watched her take a room full of powerful people apart, with nothing but truth and 2 years of homework. He chose wrong when he chose you. He thought you were the weakest thing in that room. Lily looked at him. Something moved in her expression, brief and real, and entirely unguarded. "He thought a lot of things," she said. "He was wrong about most of them." Outside, the Wyoming afternoon ran long and gold across the land, and somewhere in Cheyenne, a senator was negotiating the price of his conscience, and somewhere closer, Marcus Thorne was learning that the ground beneath his 23 years had cracked, and it had cracked from underneath, and the crack had started with a girl in a borrowed blue dress who showed up to his banquet and did not perform the role she'd been paid to perform. The documents were in Briggs's briefcase. The affidavit was filed. The Attorney General's office had opened an inquiry. And James Harper's daughter was sitting at a kitchen table in Cole Bennett's ranch house, working. Still working, because that was what she did when there was something left to do. There was still something left to do. The letter from Thorne arrived Friday morning. Not through a lawyer, not through a messenger. It came in a plain envelope with Cole's name on the front in handwriting that was not Thorne's, someone he'd hired to write it, which was itself a statement about how carefully Thorne was managing his paper trail now. Cole opened it at the kitchen table with Lily sitting across from him and Dutch standing by the stove, and he read it out loud because there were no secrets left in this house worth keeping. The letter was 3 paragraphs. The first expressed regret that the evening at Thorne Manor had become unpleasant. The second offered again the water rights purchase, this time at double the previous figure, which was a number that would have made Cole's breath catch 6 months ago. The third paragraph was the one that mattered. It said in the careful, lawyered language of a man who knew every word might eventually be read by a judge. "I would encourage Mr. Bennett to consider the full implications of pursuing adversarial proceedings, particularly given that certain parties involved in this matter may not be who they represent themselves to be, and that documentation obtained through irregular means may not withstand the scrutiny of proper legal examination." Cole set it down. Certain parties, Dutch said. That's me, Lily said. She said it without heat, without surprise. He's going to argue the documents were obtained illegally, that I stole them or fabricated them or both. She looked at Cole. He's been preparing this since Saturday night. This letter is him telling us he's ready. Are the documents clean? Cole said. Every one of them the way you obtained them. Every courthouse record was pulled through the public access process, she said. I signed the access log every single time. My name is on 18 separate request forms over 22 months. She paused. The Marsh ledger was given to me voluntarily by its owner. I have a witness to that transfer. Ruth Connolly was present when he handed it to me. Cole looked at her. You made sure of that. I made sure of everything, she said quietly. I knew that eventually someone would question how I got what I have. I made it impossible to challenge. She looked at the letter. He doesn't know that yet. He thinks I'm an amateur who stumbled into documents she barely understands. Then let him keep thinking it, Dutch said. Cole folded the letter. I'm sending a response through Briggs. No direct communication with Thorne from this point forward. He looked at Lily. Agreed. Agreed, she said. She reached for the letter and held it a moment, looking at the third paragraph, the way you look at something that was meant to frighten you and failed. Then she set it down and went back to work. Briggs's telegram arrived the same afternoon, and it hit the kitchen like a stone through glass. Payne testified Wednesday. Full cooperation. Named Thorne as architect of filing scheme beginning 1877. Confirmed 6 payments from Thorne Land Management to county officials over 7 years. A G office has issued formal subpoena for Thorne's business records. Hearing scheduled in 3 weeks. Prepare to travel to Cheyenne. Dutch read it over Cole's shoulder and let out a long, slow breath. Lily read it twice, put it face down on the table, and pressed both hands flat against the wood. Her eyes were closed for exactly 4 seconds. Then she opened them. Payne gave them everything, she said. Everything he knew, Cole said. Which is enough. She looked up. Thorne's business records. If the subpoena holds and they actually pull his files. She stopped. Cole, if they pull his internal correspondence, there will be things in there that make the ledger look like a grocery list. You think he's kept records? Men like Thorne always keep records, she said. Because they believe they're untouchable, and untouchable men document their power. They do it because the files make them feel certain, in control. She paused. He never imagined anyone would ever subpoena them. Dutch looked at Cole. 3 weeks to Cheyenne. We'll need to leave in 2, Cole said. He looked at Lily. You'll testify. Yes, she said, without hesitation, without performance. Just the plain, quiet certainty of someone who has been walking toward a moment for a long time and has stopped being afraid of arriving at it. It will be a formal hearing, Cole said. Thorne will have lawyers present. They'll cross-examine you. I know. They'll try to make you look obsessive, unstable, a grieving daughter who spent 2 years manufacturing a case that doesn't exist. I know that too. She looked at him steadily. Let them try. Every document I have is real. Every date I cited is accurate. Every signature I identified as forged is forged, and a handwriting expert Briggs retained in Denver has already confirmed it in writing. She paused. I'm not afraid of cross-examination. I'm afraid of losing because someone in that room has already been bought. She stopped. But Payne's testimony changes that. If a senator has already confirmed the payment structure, any official Thorne still has influence over is now too exposed to act on it. Cole looked at her. The afternoon light came through the kitchen window, and she was sitting in it, tired in the way a person gets tired when they have been running on will and precision for 2 years. And the finish line is finally close enough to see, and what was in her face was not triumph, not yet, but something that had never quite left it through any of this, which was clarity. The absolute, unshakable clarity of someone who knew exactly what they were doing, and exactly why. All right, Cole said. 2 weeks. The town of Red Hollow learned about the subpoena 3 days later. Cole heard it from the barman at the saloon, who heard it from the stage driver who had been in Cheyenne when the news moved through the courthouse district, like fire through dry grass. By Thursday, it was in the territorial paper, a brief item careful and lawyered, noting that the Attorney General's office had opened a formal inquiry into land filing practices in several Wyoming counties, and that a hearing was scheduled. Thorne's name was not in the item, not yet. But Red Hollow was a small town, and small towns had their own information system that operated considerably faster than newspapers. By Friday, the widow Ruth Connolly had 3 separate visitors who came to her door and left quickly. By Saturday, the woman who ran the millinery shop on Main Street, who had been at the Thorne banquet, who had laughed quietly at the right moments that evening, stopped Lily on the sidewalk outside Culver's and said simply, and without explanation, "Your father was a good man. I always thought so." Then she walked on. Lily stood on the sidewalk for a moment after she left. Then she kept walking. She had gone back to the grain store. Not because she had to. Cole had offered, Dutch had offered, and she had declined both with the same firm, clear reasoning she applied to everything. She would not stop working until the case was decided, because stopping felt like assuming the outcome, and assuming the outcome was the kind of thinking that made people careless. So she swept the front step and stacked the grain sacks and counted out the deliveries, and she kept the courthouse in her peripheral vision every Tuesday and Thursday, and she waited. On the Monday of the second week, Culver called her to the front of the store. He was standing behind his counter with the ledger open in front of him, the way he always stood, and he looked at her with the expression of a man who was aware he was in the middle of something larger than his store and was not comfortable there. "I've heard things," he said. "What kind of things?" she said. "About you. About what you've been doing." He shifted his weight. "About what you found." She waited. "I want you to know," he said, and then he stopped and started again. "I want you to know that if anyone asks, I'll say you've been a reliable worker, that I've never had cause to question your character." He looked down at his ledger. "I thought you should know that." It was the most Culver had ever said to her that wasn't a work instruction. She looked at him for a moment. "Thank you, Mr. Culver," she said. "That's all," he said, and went back to his ledger. She went back to the grain sacks. But something had loosened in her chest, something small, almost nothing but real. The town was turning the way towns turn, when the thing everyone knew and nobody said finally gets said out loud, and the collective pretense that it was complicated becomes impossible to maintain. Thorne made his final move on Wednesday. Cole was at the eastern fence line, always the eastern fence line, the boundary that was at the heart of everything, when 2 men he didn't know rode up on well-kept horses and stopped at the fence. They were not dressed like ranch hands. They were dressed like men who worked in offices and had been sent somewhere they considered beneath them. "Mr. Bennett," the taller one said, "we represent Thorne Land Management." "I have a lawyer," Cole said. "You can talk to him." Mr. Thorne would prefer a direct conversation. "Mr. Thorne can prefer what he likes," Cole said. "Talk to Briggs." The taller man reached into his coat and produced an envelope. "This is a revised offer, significantly revised. Mr. Thorne asks only that you review it before the Cheyenne hearing." Cole looked at the envelope, did not take it. "How significantly revised?" "Triple the previous figure," the man said. "For the water rights and your agreement to withdraw as a supporting party in the Attorney General's proceeding." The number the man named was enough to run his ranch for 4 years without income from cattle. It was enough to rebuild the eastern pasture, replace 2 aging wells, hire 3 more men. It was, by any material calculation, a life-changing sum. Cole looked at the envelope for a long moment. The 2 men waited with the practiced patience of people who believed money was the final argument in every negotiation, because in their experience, it always had been. "No," Cole said. The taller man blinked. "Mr. Bennett, I don't think you've—" "I heard the number," Cole said. "No." "Perhaps if you take some time to—" "I said no." Cole's voice was not raised. It was the flat, finished kind of no that left no room for perhaps or let me explain or have you considered. It was the no of a man who had already done his considering and was done with it. Ride back and tell Thorne that his offer was delivered and rejected. Tell him I'll see him in Cheyenne. The two men looked at each other. The shorter one said quietly, and without heat, but clearly meaning it to land. Mr. Thorne thought you might say that. He asked me to remind you that Miss Harper has a great deal to lose if this proceeding doesn't go the way she's expecting. Cole went completely still. The silence stretched for 3 full seconds. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and absolutely level, the way very still water is absolutely level right before something breaks its surface. If anything happens to Lily Harper, he said, anything at all, a job lost, a room taken, a hair on her head disturbed, I will personally deliver every document in this case to every newspaper in this territory, and 3 in Denver, and Thorne's name will be the first word in every headline. He held the man's gaze. And then I will find whoever touched her, and I will handle that separately. Are we clear? The shorter man's easy expression had gone somewhere else. He said nothing. Ride back, Cole said. They rode back. Cole stood at the fence line for a moment after they were gone, breathing through what had just moved through him. Not fear, not anger in its ordinary form, but the specific clarifying fury of someone who has just been shown the full ugliness of what they're fighting and needed to see it to know they were right to fight it. He turned and walked back toward the ranch. He told Lily that evening. All of it, the number, the condition, the threat. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. That's a lot of money, she said. Yes, he said. You said no. Yes. She looked at him. Why didn't you take it? He looked back at her with a slight expression of surprise, like the question had come from a direction he hadn't expected. You know why, he said. I want to hear you say it, she said. Not testing him, just wanting it said out loud the way some things need to be said out loud to be real. Cole was quiet for a moment. Then, because it was wrong from the beginning. Thorne took your father's land. He took his water rights. He forged his name on a document that let him die thinking he'd failed. He's taken land from 6 families that we know about. He's paid officials who were supposed to protect people to betray them instead. He paused. And he thought he could fix all of that with a number. He thought everything had a number. Cole held her gaze. Some things don't have a number. Lily looked at him for a long moment. The kitchen was quiet. Dutch had gone to bed an hour ago, and the ranch was settling into night the way a working property does, gradually sound by sound, until the only things left were the fire in the stove and 2 people at a table and the space between them that had been getting smaller for 2 weeks without either of them naming it. Cole, she said. Yes, after Cheyenne, after this is finished. She stopped, organized herself. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I've been so focused on this that I haven't thought past it. I don't have a room anymore, not really. I have a grain store job and an attic I'm not sleeping in. She looked down at her hands on the table. I'm not asking anything. I just want you to know that I'm aware I've been living in your house for 2 weeks and eating your food and... Lily, he said. She stopped. Stop apologizing for taking up space, he said. You've earned every inch of it. She looked up. He was watching her with the direct, steady attention she'd noticed the very first night. The attention that didn't look away, didn't categorize, didn't decide what it was seeing before it had finished looking. Besides, he said, I was thinking about the eastern boundary. She blinked. What about it? The water rights, if the proceeding goes the way Briggs thinks, the original Harper filing will be reinstated, which means the Callaway tributary rights your father filed are still legally his, and since you're his only heir, they become yours. He paused. That land your father originally held, 80 acres on the southern edge bordering my eastern pasture. I've been running fence along it for 3 years like it was mine, but it isn't. It's yours. Lily stared at him. That land was absorbed into Thorne's holdings when the fraudulent counterfiling stood, Cole said. If the counterfiling is voided, and Briggs believes it will be the original ownership reverts, to James Harper's estate, to you. He held her gaze. 80 acres with water access. It's not a fortune, but it's land. Real land. Your father's land. The thing that moved across Lily's face in that moment was not something she could have controlled if she'd tried, and she didn't try. It was the specific breaking open expression of someone receiving something they stopped letting themselves want so long ago that being offered it again feels like being asked to breathe underwater, terrifying and necessary and overwhelming all at once. She pressed one hand over her mouth, breathed through her nose, got herself back. "That's not certain yet," she said when she could speak. "No," he said, "but it's likely. And I wanted you to know it was coming before you started making plans that didn't include it." She looked at him. "Why?" He held her gaze and said it simply without decoration. "Because you've been planning around what you don't have for 2 years. I'd like you to try planning around what you do have for a change." Lily looked at him for a long moment, and what was between them in that quiet kitchen was not declared and not performed, but entirely real. The kind of thing that builds between people who have been through something true together. Something that stripped every pretense away and left only what they actually were underneath. "All right," she said very quietly. "All right," he said. "Aman." They left for Cheyenne on a Tuesday. Cole, Lily, Dutch, and Marsh, who came on his own horse with his jaw set and his hat pulled low, and the expression of a man who had made peace with a hard decision and was no longer reviewing it. Frances Aldridge traveled separately. Briggs had arranged her passage, and she was already in Cheyenne when they arrived, sitting in Briggs's rented office with a cup of tea and the meticulous composure of a county clerk who had spent 8 years doing things correctly and was prepared to explain in precise detail the single occasion on which the process had been subverted around her. The hearing was held in a formal room in the territorial courthouse in front of 3 members of the Attorney General's investigative panel. Thorne arrived with 4 lawyers and a composure that was, Cole had to admit, impressive. The composure of a man who had survived enough to believe he would survive this. Lily sat at the complainant's table beside Briggs and did not look at Thorne. She looked at the panel, and her back was straight, and her hands were folded on the table in front of her, and she was ready. Briggs presented the case in the methodical, devastating sequence he had organized over the past 2 weeks. The original filing. The impossible date on the counterfiling. The dual clerk procedure that had been deliberately bypassed using Frances Aldridge's unplanned absence. The Marsh ledger. Payne's prior testimony entered into the record. The handwriting expert's written confirmation of the forged withdrawal. Each piece landed cleanly. Each piece connected to the next with the terrible logic of a thing that is simply true, not argued into truth, not constructed into it, just laid out flat in the light where everyone could see it. Thorne's lawyers objected 17 times. The panel sustained 4 of those objections, which was a fair record for lawyers doing their jobs, and a worse one than Thorne needed. Then Lily testified. She was on the stand for 2 hours and 40 minutes. Thorne's lead attorney, a compact, precise man from Denver named Hargrove, who had the practiced aggression of someone very good at his work, came at her from every angle he had. The circumstances of her employment, the irregular hours she'd spent in the courthouse, the fact that she had attended the Thorne banquet under, as he put it, unusual arrangements, the possibility that her grief over her father's death had caused her to interpret coincidental record-keeping discrepancies as intentional fraud. She answered every question. She answered them without hesitation and without anger, with the specific, unhurried precision of someone who had been preparing for exactly this conversation for 2 years. When Hargrove suggested the date discrepancy was a clerical error, she explained in exact technical detail why a 14-day discrepancy in that direction was not possible through any clerical mechanism. When he suggested the ledger was fabricated, she directed the panel to the independent authentication Briggs had obtained from a document examiner in Denver. When he suggested she had a personal vendetta that compromised her objectivity, she looked at him with perfect calm and said, "My objectivity is demonstrated by the records, Mr. Hargrove. My father's name on a forged withdrawal is not a conclusion I reached because I was angry. It is a conclusion I reached because the handwriting does not match any other document he signed in his lifetime, and because a professional expert has confirmed it. You're welcome to dispute the expert's methodology. His credentials are in the exhibit file. Hargrove paused. Reset. Tried 3 more angles. She answered all 3. In the gallery, Cole sat beside Dutch and did not move, and watched her hold that room the way she had held the banquet hall, not by force, not by volume, but by the absolute unassailability of someone who was telling the truth, and had the evidence to prove it, and was not afraid of anyone in that room. Marsh testified after Lily. He was on the stand for 90 minutes and his voice was steady, and he named every name in the ledger with the careful precision of a man reading from his own conscience. When Hargrove suggested the ledger was a fabrication designed to settle old grievances, Marsh looked at him and said, "I wrote every entry myself. I know my own handwriting, and I kept it for 22 years because I always knew this day would come. I just didn't know I'd be the one to bring it." Francis Aldridge testified for 40 minutes and was, as Briggs had predicted, immovable, the righteous precision of an honest clerk who had been used against her own integrity and had not forgotten it. The panel recessed for deliberation at 4 o'clock. They waited in the hallway outside the hearing room. Cole stood. Dutch sat. Marsh stood by a window and looked out of it with the expression of a man watching his own past being weighed. Lily sat beside Cole on the bench close enough that their shoulders were almost touching, and neither of them moved away. "You did everything you could," Cole said low. "I know," she said. "Whatever they decide." "Cole," she said, "I know." She looked straight ahead. "I've known from the night I found that signature that I was doing the right thing. The outcome doesn't change that." A pause. "But I want the outcome." "So do I," he said. They waited. At 6:15 the doors opened. The panel chair read the findings in the flat measured language of legal proceedings, which stripped all drama from words that were in their substance anything but flat. The counterfiling of 1881 on the Callaway tributary water rights was found to have been submitted with a fraudulent processing date and processed in violation of county filing procedures. The withdrawal bearing James Harper's name was found to bear a signature inconsistent with authenticated samples of James Harper's handwriting and was formally voided. The payments recorded in the Marsh ledger were found to constitute evidence of a pattern of official corruption warranting criminal referral to the territorial prosecutor's office. Thorne Land Management was ordered to cease all activity on properties subject to the original disputed filings pending full review. A formal criminal investigation into Marcus Thorne was recommended. The room was quiet for 3 full seconds after the chair finished reading. Then it wasn't. Thorne's lawyers were on their feet. Thorne himself sat without moving, and his face was doing something that faces do when a man has finally arrived at the edge of everything he believed was permanent and looked over it and seen what was below. Lily did not stand. She sat at the complainant's table and let the noise move around her, and she pressed both hands flat on the table, and she closed her eyes for 4 seconds, and then she opened them. Briggs was speaking quietly at her ear, something about next steps, the criminal referral, the property review process, the timeline for the reinstatement of the original filings. She heard the words. She let them exist alongside the other thing, the thing that had no legal terminology and no case number, the thing that was just her father's name cleared in the record of a territorial courthouse by a panel that had read the truth and called it what it was. She stood. Turned. Cole was 3 steps behind her, because he had moved through the gallery the moment the chair finished reading the way you move toward something when you are no longer willing to be on the other side of a room from it. She looked at him. He looked at her. "It's done," he said. "It's started," she said. "The criminal investigation is still Lily." He said her name the way you say something when you need a person to stop talking for 1 second and just be where they are. "It's done enough." She looked at him. And for the first time since the Tuesday night, she'd sat in a church vestry, holding forged documents against her chest in the dark, The thing she'd been carrying, the constant, exhausting 2-year weight of it shifted. Not gone, but shared. Distributed across something larger than one woman alone in an attic room with courthouse copies and borrowed lamplight. She breathed. "Yes," she said. "Done enough." Marcus Thorne was indicted by the Territorial Prosecutor's Office 11 weeks later. The charges included land fraud, filing, fraud, bribery of public officials, and conspiracy. Caldwell was located in Colorado and extradited. Senator Gerald Payne received a formal censure and resigned his seat before the criminal proceedings concluded. 3 county officials were removed from their positions. The Harper water rights were reinstated in full. The 80 acres on the southern boundary reverted to Lily Harper as James Harper's sole heir. Reginald Marsh lost his brokerage license and his standing in Red Hollow, and he built a modest house in Casper and lived out the remaining years of his life with the particular peace of a man who at 64 had finally stopped looking away. Frances Aldridge was promoted to head clerk of the county recorder's office, a position she held for 19 years. And on a clear morning in September of 1884, Cole Bennett rode the eastern fence line of his property the way he rode it every morning. And when he reached the southern boundary, the place where his land met the 80 acres that now legally and permanently and without question belonged to Lily Harper, he stopped his horse. She was already there. She had ridden out from the ranch house before him, which he should have expected because she had been getting up before him every morning since Cheyenne, and he had stopped being surprised by it. She was sitting her horse at the boundary line looking at the land that had been her father's, that a forged signature had taken, that the truth had given back. He pulled up beside her. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "It looks different," she said, "when it's yours." "Yes," he said, "it does." She turned to look at him. He was looking at the land, and then he was looking at her, and what was between them in that September morning was everything they had been through together, and everything that was still ahead, and neither of those things was small. "I've been thinking," she said, about what Briggs said, about Margaret Voss, about the territorial bar." She held his gaze. "About what comes next. And I think," she said, "that there are a lot of James Harpers in this territory. People who lost things they shouldn't have lost, who couldn't fight back because they didn't know how, because the paperwork was too complicated and the lawyers were too expensive, and the system was designed by the people who benefited from it staying complicated." She paused. "I think someone should know how to fight it." Cole looked at her. The morning light was full on her face, and she was looking straight at him. And she was 23 years old and had just brought down a 23-year criminal enterprise with 2 years of courthouse visits and borrowed lamplight and the absolute refusal to let a forged signature be the last word on her father's life. "You're going to study law," he said. "I'm going to study law," she said. He nodded. Once. Slowly. With the complete unqualified respect of someone who has never doubted for a single moment that the person in front of them was capable of exactly what they say they're going to do. "Then you'll need the income from those 80 acres to cover your expenses," he said. "That land has good water access. We could run a small grazing arrangement. My cattle your land split revenue." He paused. "If you're interested in a partnership." She looked at him. "A grazing partnership." "To start," he said. The 2 words sat between them in the September air, simple and plain, and carrying everything that hadn't yet been said, and didn't need to be said yet, because they had time now, they had the remarkable hard-won luxury of time. "To start," she said. She turned her horse toward the land. Her land. Her father's land, returned. She looked at it for one long full moment, at the grass and the sky and the distant line of the Callaway tributary catching the morning light, and she let herself feel all of it, the grief and the victory and the exhaustion and the beginning of something that had not yet been named. Then she straightened in the saddle, and she rode forward onto her own ground, and the Wyoming morning opened up ahead of her wide and clear and entirely without limit. James Harper's daughter had come home. And no one, not Marcus Thorne, not a forged signature, Not 23 years of a system built to erase people who couldn't afford to fight back had been able to stop her. You said Viet Lai Fan Hook Mo Do Kukik Ban Ne Kukmang.